I love this topic tonight, how to move away from not knowing who we are to moving into this position of operating from this place of knowing, from owning our story and owning who we were created to be in the first place. And so much of this whole conversation actually needs to start with debunking the myth that who you were is who you are and who you will be forever. So often this whole narrative of, well, this is who I am, or that's how it is, or this is how I was raised, becomes this stamp of, well, this is just the way it will be for the rest of my life. And it's very deeply subconscious. It's almost this like undercurrent through our veins of this is the way we are. This is in our DNA, which is how you were raised, what was modeled for you, the narratives that were instilled in you, what was spoken over you. Our words have so much power. I will always remember the very first time I learned that there was this experiment done where there were two different plants. One plant received words that were literally life-giving, encouraging, loving, doting, adoring. And this other plant, they received the same amount of sunlight, water, but this other plant actually received words that were really detrimental, literally just in general. And it was so interesting because this other plant that received the negative words withered and died literally before the eyes of those who are administering the test. And so there is something so incredibly powerful and like almost, man, if we could just see the power of our words that are coming out, the potency of what we're offering to the world around us, much less so to ourselves and to those literal individuals around us, I think we would be kind of shocked. And maybe that would even shock us into action of, let me put a guard over my mouth so that the words that come forth actually bring life, because there is nothing neutral, no thought, no word spoken. And so as we have this conversation tonight around how do we own our story, it actually starts with us recognizing, well, what are the thoughts that I have around myself, around the world around me, about God, and about my past? Because that most likely will be the thing that perpetuates into what I experience in the day to day and what becomes my reality. And so, as we're having this conversation tonight, it's so important that we recognize the power of our words, but also recognize that, okay, what we think about in terms of the past, apart from conscious intention, we will have that be the script that's running in the background. It's just kind of our default. Last night we talked about this. What's your baseline? What's your modus operandi? If nobody's watching, if nobody's with you, if you just kind of wake up and you're in a daze, what do you do next? For a lot of us, our default is making coffee or getting dressed or going to the gym. And it's just, you've done it so many times. It's a repetition. It's familiar. It's comfortable. It's safe. And you just go to that thing when you're on autopilot. And so this conversation around what is the autopilot of your mind around your story is so important, because what you use to define you, the words you use, even the posture of how you're delivering that. I've watched it so many times in business. And this conversation is as important for you, whether you have a business or whether you're an individual and we're just having a cup of tea. I have my cup of tea right there tonight. And we talk about owning our story as individuals. But I've watched business owners come forward and share their story around how they got to where they are today. And there's a posture around it. There's verbiage used. There's either kind of filling up space and shoulders rolled back, and there's a pride and a confidence over how far they've come. They're looking back and seeing the gain. I've also seen people who have told a story with maybe equal passion, but there's some shame that's kind of enshrouding their story. And it's the story that actually is still one that's unfolding in their lives today, where maybe they have a really unhealthy mindset around money, or they have a really unhealthy mindset around, I grew up in the streets and in the hood, and I still don't feel safe, even though I've completely changed my life. Maybe I have that white picket fence that I always dreamed of, but because I haven't done the work to rewrite my story, that old story that is, it's still perpetuating itself, and it's like the through line in my life. Remember, we talked about that through line is so often our DNA, unless we consciously rewrite our story. So what we're bringing with us from the past only informs the past, unless we haven't done the work to create something new. So if we haven't, then the past has everything to do with the present. There's a book that I love. It's called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And it completely changed the way I understood how literally the physical body remembers what we've been through. It remembers trauma, it remembers pain, it remembers social rejection. There's been so many studies done across the world where if you've gone through social rejection, your body actually, and your brain, like your neurological system, stores that memory similar to how it would if you went through physical pain. So emotional pain and physical pain have a very strong link in how our body and our mind and our entire nervous system records that as data. So if we have not done the work to go back, that handwriting, that chapter is just as true today as it was 20 years ago. Rather than us being able to look at, like, now I've gotten novels in my life because there have been so many different stories written and stories for different seasons, rather than I'm actually still reliving that chapter from when I was 13 years old because I haven't rewritten it or I haven't added to it. Sometimes our bodies stay frozen back in the time which they experienced that moment of pain. And so it's the opportunity that we have as we're talking around how do we own our story. Sometimes part of owning it is actually just admitting the reality of what is. And then the other part of it is I'm actually going to add, it's time to add new chapters. It doesn't mean that it nullifies what happened. It doesn't mean that what happened before isn't important. In fact, it doesn't mean that that doesn't still hurt anymore or that it's not just as important. I have had chapters close and books close in my life. And I think that part of the grieving process is that I didn't necessarily want those chapters to close. And books to end. And so the thought of actually letting those stories be done, writing the end, there's a grief there, whether it's the ending of a relationship or the ending literally of someone's life, and we're closing that chapter and realizing, like, you're no longer with us. There is something that's, I think, part of what makes it even more devastating. It's not just that they're no longer living, but our story is done with them. And man, is that something to grieve forever, but there's now there's a new chapter. Now there's a new book. There's a new introduction. There's a new chapter one in a different cadence, in a completely different season. Maybe you've moved. Maybe you have new neighbors. Maybe your kids are in new schools. Maybe you have a new job. Each one of those, depending on the significance, has an opportunity to write a new story in our lives. But if we have so much undealt with, then it's kind of like we don't even have capacity to allow for the new, to allow for real change of mindset, of a heart posture, of a relationship to come in and really have this like deepening effect that, man, now I am able to have the capacity to receive and then be able to give as a result. So if we're like filled up, think of like a well, it's been filled up over the years, and now it's like at the brim of spilling over, and we don't have any more space to contain anything more. And so part of closing of the chapters is grieving and processing and saying goodbye and delighting in what once was, and recognizing that, man, sometimes it's just as beautiful and wonderful to say goodbye so that we can have capacity for what's to come. And that's, I think, really honoring what was and allowing for, I read this quote when I was processing my brother-in-law and his death. It said, every lament is a love song. And I love that, because there's not a ton of space given for a lot of us to just, if it's a hard day and you're grieving that person who's been lost, well, it's been a year, or it's been 6 months, or it's been 3 years and you're still grieving them, that's where our stories today, we're the author in so many ways. And it's authoring based off of our own potential of who we were created to be. But man, if I haven't dealt with that in the past and what's behind me and what's over my shoulder, then there's no way that I really can walk in the fullness of what's to come and what's waiting for me to receive. But my hands are so full with the past that I haven't dealt with that I actually cannot physically contain and hold the beauty of what's being offered and what's in store for me. Before I continue, I just want to jump here in the chat. Hello, my friends. I'm so glad to see you. It's been a while. I went offline for about a week, and it was the first time in over a year that I didn't go live, and I've missed you all. Real Deal Primer, hello. Good to see you. Same with music types. Oh, I love that. Oh, Wayne, I'm so glad to see you. Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. That's such a beautiful phrase. Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. Yeah, Z, good morning or good evening. Image Elohim, I'm so glad to see you. Whatever is spoken above me is not about me, that they don't know, but about themselves. That's because it is written, as you judge, you will be judged. You know, what a good, I'm glad you brought that perspective in. And y'all, this is why we're here, is to learn from each other. And Image Elohim, what you just said here about so often what's spoken about us or over us, so to say, especially as kids, that sometimes it has very little to do with you and me. And so that's part of the reason why it's important to process. All right, how much of my narrative today is actually because of my own experience or because of what someone else has been through that they've projected into, into the room when I was a kid, and I just listened and I picked it up, or I just kind of inherited this mindset. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because a lot of what's told to us or even shared about us, what's whispered, how much of that is actually genuinely about us versus we're being a mirror for somebody and causing kind of that trigger, which is good. That's part of the reason why we need relationship. It's for the purpose of having the mirror reflected to us. Y'all, our clients are some of the biggest mirrors for us. Our friends are the biggest mirrors, but especially our partners, whether it's a business partner or an actual spouse or in a romantic relationship. The partners we hold, the people that we have to go into rooms behind closed doors, whether it's a boardroom or the bedroom, that is where our true self really is being reflected. So then the question is, do you like who you are when you're in those close quarters? Or are we just pointing the fingers saying, I hate that you make me this way, when in reality, maybe it was there to begin with, because we're bringing the past with us today. But that doesn't have to stay. Y'all, when we think about changing, man, is it possible? We see it all the time in nature, but I don't think we really believe that about ourselves. Like, oh, if I believed I could really change, well, who would I want to be? And if I have this big calling and this big mission, and I really believe that I've got something to complete in my life, well, then who do I actually need to become? How do I need to change in order to achieve that? And I have some real things that I need to change about the way that I think and the way that I show up. And it's no longer now just like, oh, it's a nice thing to change. For example, I'll just be really honest, the way that I view money. I really have a tough relationship with money. I feel guilty. Like I really, really, really do. And I really pride myself in not charging anything for services, or charging hardly anything, or only charging for certain things that like branding and marketing. I'm like, okay, I can charge for that because that's obviously what people do to exchange, services for revenue. At the same time, I've got this whole big dream and this big mission that I feel called to. And I have to fix my concept around money, because, man, if I can't charge for the thing that I feel called to, I will never be able to make the impact that I want to make. So the question is, are we brave enough to start changing the mindset and understanding the root of why that exists in the first place, so that we can get to the next level. And here's one thing that's interesting, even as we're talking about this, the old mindset may actually not even be wrong. It just isn't at that next level. It's served for this season now. It's kind of like when we look back in childhood, let's say, and we look back on a habit that was formed in reaction or in response to maybe a cruel behavior by a friend or a sibling or a caretaker. And we learned this pattern of behavior to keep us safe. So now, today in adulthood, that behavior actually doesn't serve us because we're no longer in that environment. But it's really important that we look back with a compassionate, curious view about, okay, well, why was that there to begin with? And then actually, my coach told me this. He said, thank that, like that habit, because it kept you safe. So if we want real change, the change needs to come with an awareness of, what is my modus operandi? What is my current baseline? And then what do I want the new way of being to look like? And then how do I actually establish the kind of the connective tissue between who I was yesterday or today, who am I today, and then who do I want to be tomorrow? What is the one thing? Gary Keller and Jay Papasan wrote the book called The One Thing. And they talk about this concept of what is the lead domino in your life that if you were to knock that over, and the mathematics are, if you knocked over this one domino, if you had enough lined up, it would have the velocity to knock over the Eiffel Tower. So what is the lead domino in your life? So if you've got the clarity of, this is where I'm starting, and then clarity on, this is where I'm going, what is the one thing that I need to do in order to get there? Or the one change maybe. And then it's looking at where I am today with compassion and with kindness. And then really, man, executing discipline. Jocko Willink says discipline equals freedom. And so if we're willing to enact discipline with this desire for real change, we know where we're coming from, we know where we're going, we have gratitude for the past, but we've got discipline for tomorrow. Man, are we going to really be able to move mountains? But do we believe we can change? And I think that might actually be probably the most important question for tonight. How do we own our story? Well, do we believe we can change? Do we believe we're even the ones with the pen to begin with? Or are we victims? We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Do we actually, at a subconscious level, live and think and act like victims, where, well, I am this way because insert blank, whatever your experience was. So do you believe you can change? Do you actually believe that you have the power to author your life? Just jumping here in the chat. Goose Hunter, I'm so glad to see you. Wayne, hello from the UK. I'm so glad you're here. DJ Sky, hello. Ahmed, hello. Thanks for joining. Wayne says, you have not because you ask not. That's so good. The past is the parent of the present. Ooh, that's so good. Adrian, hello. I'm glad you're here. KJT, hello. Thanks for joining. Troy, thank you. I'm glad you're here. Comic Flick Fusion, I'm so glad to see you. I always love seeing your name. Kak Kara, hello. Carlene, hello. Instating, hello. Thanks for joining. Jim Dandy. Oh, I'm glad you're here. Moto Man X, hello. I'm so glad to see you. Wow. Motto says, I find I miss my dad more over time. Oh, don't even get me started, man. I cannot fathom not having my dad. And so I'm so sorry you don't have yours. That is just so devastating. L8K, hello. Jake, hello. Stinky, hello. Thanks for joining. Cameron, hello from Scotland. Oh, I love Scotland. Man21, good to see you. Explore says, who is your next guest? Oh, I don't know who I have lined up. Actually, shout out to Patricia, she's the girl, the wonderful girl on my team who gets all of our guests. If you guys have a guest that you'd like to come on the show, let me know. I would love, love, love to hear. Go ahead and email me at, actually, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the chat. This is, I don't think folks who are watching this on Facebook will see, but go ahead and send this to address Patricia, and then you can email info@theknowingagency. If you have anybody that you recommend or would like to see on here. I miss having good guests. It's been not good guests, but it's been a while since I've had guests, so I'm glad you asked. So yeah, go ahead and email info@theknowingagency, and if you have somebody in mind, we'll go ahead and hopefully get that worked out. Jason, hello, Wisconsin. I'm 52 years old. I work for a famous basketball team as an equipment manager, and they can be, backstabbers, these famous ball players. Man, I think to your point, it doesn't actually matter who you are, what's your status, where you are in the world. It's that conversation around, what are your beliefs and what are your values and what's driving you? Because God forbid we get the wealth and we don't have the quality of character to guide us in the execution of it and the sharing of it and the utilization of it for good, So I was actually thinking about this morning. We were driving and I just had this thought, like, how much I don't have kids yet, but how much for my kids do I really, like, how will I emphasize how much character matters? Yes, go for your dreams, and yes, dream big and work hard and have the discipline, but man, is character just at the most foundational level. But even beyond that, it's like it's the actual thread or maybe it's a better analogy, it's the needle that weaves it all together. It's, man, if we don't have that character. So I feel that. Michael Jameson, I'm so glad to see you, my friend. Michael's joining us on Facebook. He says, I've struggled a lot with being ashamed of who I am because of how I was ridiculed by my own parents. Wow. Michael, I've actually thought about you a couple of times. You've shared a little bit along the way, and I'm so grateful for how you're doing the work now to reconcile that. And I don't know how much you have in the past, and today you're free from that, or you're just getting started. Either way, y'all, it's never too late to start. And just because we've dealt with it in the past doesn't mean it's not going to rear its head in other ways. I really think that and I've experienced this to be true for myself when I'm hosting knowing retreats. Things come back up. There's different triggers, and it's almost, I had this reflected to me actually by a coach a couple years ago. And she said, when you feel safe with people, that's when the pain comes back, or that's when the pain shows up, because now it's time to address it. If you don't feel safe with somebody, you're going to suppress and hide your pain from them. But when you actually feel safe, you let your guard down and you actually kind of expose yourself. And it's actually a sign of intimacy when that pain starts coming out. So it's something to be almost honored. Like, thank you for showing me your true colors, even though I don't maybe like it, but I just really love that reframe, because it is challenging. I was raised to never have conflict, and I didn't know how to do conflict. But now when I start seeing the frustration or the anger or just any kind of emotion that's not just smiling and being happy, it's like, oh man, we're getting real now. And so, it's funny. I was out to dinner with a couple friends over the last few days, and I would have a bite of something and I'd be like, oh, that's so interesting. And they started teasing me, and I didn't even realize I was doing it, that they were like, say you don't like it. And I was like, well, I can see good in it. I mean, so it was just a funny example, but it holds weight of, do we even have the ability to, like, who do we have the ability to really be truthful with? To really, man, get angry at God with that person and be like, I don't understand. Do we have even the ability to get angry at God with God? Do we have the ability to contend in our own minds around the confusion that we feel around how there's so much pain and suffering, yet how is God good? And how do I deal with this broken heart, yet also feel maybe attraction or love for somebody new? How do we contend with these real seeming opposites? Somebody said one time, and somebody who was a guest on the Knowing Show, so shout out to all the past guests. It is a mark of emotional maturity to hold two seeming opposites. So basically, that conjunction and is the connective tissue between good and evil, or it's probably a bad analogy. I would say maybe pain and joy. It's probably a better one and more apt for this conversation around how do I allow for the deep sorrow and the deep joy? Because as we move through the deep sorrow, it actually kind of like I just had this visual in my mind a couple years ago when I just was like weeping over losing my brother-in-law. I also felt like I had this greater, almost like carving out of the soul, this like deepened hollowing out so I could enjoy. My brother-in-law was killed and his daughter was 3 weeks old and I never met her. And so we had this like precious, precious baby girl in our lives while we were just so devastated over the loss of her daddy. And so how do you contend with that? And there's so many seeming opposites in our lives. If we allow for us to just start tiptoeing into the deep end of what is emotion and what does it feel like, so that it doesn't seem like something so scary that it could overpower me, but it's something that I become familiar with so that I can feel it, sense it, understand it, know it, and then decide, am I going to continue to lean into it, or am I actually going to choose, here in this moment, I'm actually not going to, I don't want to feel sorrow right now. I don't want to feel depressed right now. I found that if I drank a glass of wine by myself at brunch, and this happened, I was at brunch and I had a glass of wine and I just started feeling so sad. And I was like, you know what? I actually don't want to feel this way. And so I stopped drinking and then I switched to, I guess, I don't know, something else. Y'all, we get the decision to choose. We have the power to write our own story. The question is, do we recognize we have the power to begin with? And do we have the right source? And by the right source, I mean, do we have the vision by the one who created us over our own potential, our own worth, over the direction of where could I go? What is possible for me given my unique skills, my unique story, my own unique ability to engage with people, my experience. So the more we come to know who we are, and then this other concept of whose we are, how are we crafted, how are we made so unique and so different, and then what does it look like to have basically take up the responsibility of assuming the author's pen and starting to write with intention. This is how I will think. This is how I will execute discipline. This is how I will show up for those around me. This is how I will show up just for myself. When it's you versus you in the morning and the alarm goes off, what will you choose? No one else is there. And this is for me as much as all of us. The best times in my life were when I was waking up at 4 a.m. I haven't woken up at 4 a.m. in a very long time. And so I'm committed to starting to do that again because I know, man, if I want to live for me, this is for me. Some people, I actually need to stay up until 2 a.m. creating, or staying up until 3 a.m. because the hours between 1 and 3 a.m. are like my time. For me, it's between 4 and 7 a.m. in the morning. Those hours are sacred and precious, but it requires so much discipline for me to say yes and to that, and thus have to say no to something else. So this question of, well, how do we own our story? Do we know what our one thing is? And that one thing exists in the space between the past and the future. It's like, basically, how am I going to live in this present moment? What's the one thing? How will I live right here, right now, so that my future looks different from my past? Just jumping back here in the chat. Goose Hunter. I love your questions. Okay, so to give some context onto Goose Hunter's question, we on the Knowing Show talk about our 4 core intelligences: emotional intelligence, intellectual intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and physical intelligence. So Goose Hunter says, in an event of a disturbance in one of the pillar of intelligences, How do we maneuver the others to return to the state of homeostasis and symbiosis between them? How to return to the balance? I love that question. Actually, I hope you won't be annoyed with me. I'm sorry if you are. I think that this warrants an entire show. Goose Hunter, if you're okay with it, this is going to be the thing we talk about tomorrow. What a beautiful phrasing of this question too, because we're talking about these real seeming opposites. And what could be more seemingly opposite than intellect and emotion, logic and feeling? Like, how do these things coexist together? But in reality, abating one for another is actually going to be the detriment of us living as wholehearted, full humans that are alive, because we are both parts. And then add in the spirit and the physical, and we're really this quadrant. Y'all, I must go. I'm so sad to leave being with you guys. Gigi, oh, I'm so glad to see you. I'm just gonna run through and say hey to some folks, and then I'm gonna go ahead and jump off, but we'll be back on tomorrow night. Robert, good to see you. Paxton, I'm glad to see you, my friend. Apoka, hello, good to see you. It's good to see your name. I'm trying to change. I love that. A habit that has been stuck with me has been believing that I don't speak clearly and I don't make sense whenever anyone doesn't hear or understand me, and I have to repeat or clarify myself because my parents always responded to me like I'm crazy. Wow. Michael says this on Facebook. You know, I just want to say this again, Michael. I really respect that you know the past from where you came from so clearly. And then it's okay. Then the next step is, okay, well, what's the new target? This is the knowing framework. It's, well, who was I? How does the past show up in the present? So who was I? Who am I today? And then who do I want to be? So until we clearly define those new targets, and the new target might be a new behavior, it might be a new belief. But until we clearly defined the new, the old is just going to be this old hamster wheel that we find ourselves on. So I just so respect that you've been in that. You've done the work to know the past. And it sounds like you're doing the work to create those new targets. Like, for example, speaking clearly, what is the reframe of that? Of who do you want to be? Someone who is articulate, wise, maybe. You know, I wonder if there's something around, you know, being told you're crazy, or being told this hits home for me. So I wonder if sometimes the things that people attack the most in us are actually the most beautiful and true about us. They're actually the light. And the attack is, man, it's like most fierce over that which is most beautiful, or towards that which is most beautiful. So to your point, Michael, where you said, you know, speaking clearly and making sense, or like having people understand you, man, does it probably mean that your words do hold so much power and you do have so much wisdom. So y'all, this is for all of us. How and where are we most attacked? And could that very well be the thing that is the greatest light? And so how do we actually need to preserve that and protect it at all costs? My friends, thank you so much for joining. It was so wonderful to be with you all tonight. I got just a quick little backstory. I was in Rome, ready to fly home today, and the flight got delayed, and then the flight from my connecting flight got canceled and switched to tomorrow. So I'm staying in Italy until Friday. So there are worse places to stay, but a little bit stranded. So making the most of it, but I'm glad to spend this evening with you all. I hope you have a wonderful evening. I will see you all tomorrow on The Knowing Show.